So if you saw me, good evening all. Blessings by God's grace. I don't know if you were seeing me all the time. We don't have our regular operator on this evening. I am now becoming familiar with the, um, the room to have these conversations in these forums on the StreamYard program. But nevertheless, let me take this time to say good evening to you all. My name is Sharma Solomon. I am the guest host for this evening, straight up on 107.1, streaming across the world and broadcasting in Guyana on Benchcop Radio. Let me take the time to recognize the Benchcop organization and also Mark himself, as I am from time to time called on these program. It is Mark pursuing his path to higher education. I wish him well. I look forward to seeing him graduate with all of those distinctions that we know he is capable of. And to also say to you all, it's always a pleasure to be in your company. Um, though the program for me is once a week, sitting in for Mark requires me to find additional content and additional issues that we can meaningfully have dialogue and have conversations on. And I do look forward for those engagements. I continue to say to you all that my engagements are very practical. It allows for very much involved in terms of me relating and responding to you. We haven't gotten to that point as yet, but I hope God willing we will get soon. But this evening we'll discuss a few important topics. I hope that the program that accommodates me on Thursdays and sometimes Fridays, um, when we get to that in terms of the name and what the structure program is, I can maintain that discourse with you on the issue of a democratic society. And even though we are emphasizing a lot on good governance as one of the elements, and we look at the issues of human rights and all the other elements that we outlined, I take that as really the area that program is going to focus on. So though we're going to have many issues in our society, many points for focal conversations and issues that we must raise, I take the time because of the background I have acquired as a past chairman who dealt a lot with seeing how good governance can affect or impact to develop a community. I take it a pride that in my pursuit of educational development in going towards HR, international relations, sorry, IR, and to also have IR so deeply embedded with politics, it gave for me a better appreciation. Even as I said last week, my final year program dealt with um, the impact of our foreign policy relations with our bilateral partner, more so the US, and our multilateral partners in CARICOM and OAS, and how those relationship, how those policies have impacted our electoral system, looking at the Ite era and the Janet Jagan period, and how that evolved into what we saw in 2020. Very interesting project. I had the input from the likes of Mr. Vincent Alexander. Um, we should have had Henry Jeffrey on it. We had Ronald Austin and our now opposition leader, Mr. Aubrey Martin, who were all interviewed to be part of that research and indeed lend value to it. So without saying I did very well on it, I would not go further to appear boastful, but it was a very well done research, and it brought together my period as chairman, where I saw the issue of good governance um, in terms of representation, and it also, as a student in pursuit of a degree in international relations, it also brought together how to bring the research element on these matters. So I really want to, when engaging with you all on my Thursday or Friday program, um, be very encouraging of that sort of discussion and direction of conversation. But we're on this program. This is more a freestyle. I take it not for granted that I'm on the um, first day of the week program, the second day of the week program, sorry, and I'm able to share with you some of the happenings within our society, and some of it also relates to what we were discussing. Always, as I do four areas we look at, I want to really, um, because of my involvement at the moment with so many uh, organizations that lend help, quiet help we do to many people who are in very unfortunate situations. And when the essence of that, and I'll take the topics one by one, so I'll not lead you up into them as I normally give you the agenda. The agenda, first topic, cost of living. That's what we're dealing with, because having the opportunity and the humble privilege to be called upon to lend support to many of the organizations and many people in our society, one cannot help to take a step back and appreciate the state of Guyanese and the conditions of living for Guyanese. And that goes straight to cost of living. I remember earlier in the month of April, getting into May, as we got into May Day, and the labor minister had made the statement that unions are more concerned about wages and salaries, as if it was offensive to be concerned about wages and salaries, and not recognizing that wages and salaries, as Gawu had outlined, is a fundamental bread and butter issue. And I believe it is that sort of absent mindedness, even at the level of the chief policy articulator on the issue of labor and what labor represents with regards to the working man and woman and how they're treated, and not recognizing at the forefront, front and center, for every single working man and woman in Guyana. It is the issue of cost of living, bread and butter. Fuel went up. As you speak about cost of living, fuel went up. Fuel gone up. Oil producing nation, fuel up. So with fuel prices up, and the vice president is saying there is no room for any more concessions in terms of um, giving subsidies on fuel, then it means that cost comes to us, cost to live in Ghana. Flour went up again. Bread went up at $120. Everything is up. Every produce, every commodity is up, except wages and salaries. And this is what the minister is saying to workers who are seeing these prices skyrocketing, that they have no redress. And if you choose to speak as a union, because his comments were directed at the union in anticipation of Labor Day, if you do speak about wages and salaries, then you're antiquated, you're outdated, and you're not in line with the government and the government's agenda. Can you imagine being told that as a public servant? So the government is not giving any consideration to the increases of wages. Even the Article 13 group last week with Brother Witter and Yog Mahadio and some of the other protesters were out in the streets. So when you think boots are not on the ground, people were out in the streets arguing for increasing the minimum wage. The minimum wage. So the minimum wage is $60,000. moving from maybe 30 before the opposition, the coalition, then moved it from, I believe, $39,000 to now about 60 plus thousand dollars. That is not what private sector is paid. But there is no call for the increase of the minimum wage from that number, 60 plus thousand. Understanding cost of living that is skyrocketing. And we'll come to those temporary promised 40,000 jobs, Justin, $40,000 jobs. That is 200 US a month, representing just about $2 or less than $1 plus a day. Now, the point of you recognizing cost of living every single day, as a Guyanese, as people around the world might say, but it's a world issue. Yes, it is a world issue, but the type of interventions that are being made are unlike anywhere else compared to what you see today. Guyana is handouts. We throw it out. You know, we walk around, we say, like Oprah, oh, you want 25,000? Oh, you want 200,000? Oh, you want 150,000? There is no understanding of how this will impact the daily livelihood of people, of Guyanese, every day as they prepare to go turn the wheel of growth for development as workers in this society. So the issue of cost of living is not addressed to the extent it puts the government where you see in every level. And I am not an economist. I did some amount of economics, and I understand inflation and unemployment and GDP and all of those macro style issues. But I understand at the very bread and butter, as a young man, as a father, as a husband, as a community leader, and people who live in the community among persons who you see suffering. I speak from that position. So outside of all the fancy jargons in the fancy economics, some of us know that. So the vice president and the PBP can paku in local parlance people with regards to what they see before them as the issue of cost of living and the sort of matters that they are putting in place to address them. It comes right back to what I was saying. There is absolutely no plan. I made that point last year with the flood relief grant. No plan, no plan. And I am making this point now with regards to addressing cost of living. There is no coherent plan that says to Guyanese that you're going to wake, even in these promised jobs, So we're speaking cost of living. And I'm holding my train of thought because for persons who know, we engage and we interact. And I know the 2 points that we made earlier. And I'll come to the analysis that I'll give, the perspective, and possible solutions on what we can do to ensure that we address this issue of cost of living. So the vice president is saying they're going to give out, first we'll come to the jobs and then the cash grant to deal with cost of living. And he was in Linden three times, and promised temporary jobs, as much as 800 temporary jobs. Hear what I can say to any Lindener that were promised those jobs. You don't even know what you're going to do. You've been to 3 meetings, and this is to every other place that jobs were promised. You don't know. There is no expansion in anything new in Guyana in terms of new industries that are massively taken. And in fact, the existing industries, as with Gaiwa, 300 went home, as in Linden, as you hear from the regional chairman, hundreds are sent home from the NDMA program, the program with the National Data Management Authority. So Contraction is in most sectors. Gaisuko, biggest contraction. Manufacturing, contraction. Because now you're looking at the issue of the trade agreements and concerns that now Trinidad is coming in because of our local content. So you're not expanding even in the existing sectors. It's contracting. But you're promising 800 jobs. Linden, I'm speaking on behalf of Linden, because I never knew until the vice president was in Linden, until I spoke with a few people and they said that they were. And I said, well, you have to go and see what it is that the government is offering. And if you're satisfied, then it is your tax dollars. Make the best of it. And people went and were not satisfied because they have not been told what job they're going to be doing. What temporary job to date. That is the level of hopelessness that this government is selling to people who are hopeless, or in fact, hopeful of some amount of help to get them beyond the hardship of this cost of living. People are willing to be hopeful on even the most hopeless of initiative because you don't know what job you're doing. You don't know what you have to do when you're on that job in terms of the TORs or a contract in specific to the job. And that's a fact. I am speaking to a young man yesterday who went to all three of these engagements. And his intention is that he is without work. So he is someone who is interested to know what it is. And as I speak about Linden, I'm speaking about everywhere else that jobs were promised in Region 5, Region 6, and everywhere else. You don't know what you're doing. To date, it's a promise. Those who went to the meeting on Saturday in Linden, today is Tuesday, you cannot say to me what is in place to make that reality of a temporary job something that you are going to go and get done because you don't know what it is you're going to go get done. That is the sort of hopeless society in the face of rising cost of living that people are so desperate with hope that they're holding on even to the hopeless promises. That is the reality of all of the excitement of coming to Linden. Under the pretext of scholarships, you got a crowd. Under the pretext of giving out jobs, you got a crowd. Under the pretext of giving out jobs, you got a crowd. And a crowd of people who are there, hopeful. And each one of you who are listening this evening, that is all you're holding on to, a promise. And hopefully, it is fulfilled. But wherever you know the conditions of its fulfillment, it's going to pay you $40,000 below minimum wage, and it's going to be temporary. So we come to those who were given cash grants in the interland. Again, no proper planning. How is that going to be done? We don't know. Just like the Agri Fund, and it was misappropriated, more than likely. And as I said this evening, we are flowing on the issues of perspective. I'm bringing perspective on issues that you may know, but I'm going to bring perspective of my own and solutions of what could be done in terms of ensuring that Guyanese are given a fair share and ensuring that equitable distribution of our resources are given to every single Guyanese. Today we are $150,000 to fishing folks, just like that, fishing folks. 120,000, 150,000, sorry. Ladies and gentlemen, the Guyana fishing industry employs directly about 21,000 Guyanese fishermen. I've been following the industry for quite some time. It's a fascinating industry, you know. I remember in the days I lived in Georgetown, and sometimes I um, ran on the seawall jogging. And it was so amazing to see our fishermen. So I'm giving you even the distance. 20,000 directly benefit from fishing in Guyana. And we're not talking about those men on the high seas. That fascinated me. That at nights it looked as if it's a separate city out in the Atlantic Ocean. And that industry is not only comprised of those men out there, but the boat builders, the people who put together the nets, the people who buy the marine materials. That entire sector is under siege. Without a plan, without an understanding that you have 20,000 directly to 35,000 indirectly that benefits from that sector. And you're going to Oprah Winfrey them $150,000. That's just enough to get a boat out at sea and does not address the issue that the fishing folks have asked to be looked at. So I know we're speaking cost of living, but I'm showing you the way the address of cost of living is. In Linden, promises of jobs that people don't even have a clue what it is they're going to do. In sectors where there is no expansion even in the current ones, and where are the new sectors for these jobs? They're going to be the regular D&I work, and that is going to be the ones touted right down to the bottom of promises that you'll have no choice to do that you normally do anyhow. So these fishing folks at 21,000 stretch from the quarantine coast in Region 6 all the way to Region 1. This is not a small industry. I've said that they believe they're being affected by what is now taken out in our EEZ, in our economic zone. And it is affecting the catch of fish. They need a report. So again, you're addressing a program that impacts an industry that impacts over 30,000 Guyanese by just dishing money out of them without understanding the cost of living context and the hardship that they're further facing in terms of limited catch when they go at sea. Fishermen have been complaining from the advent of our island gas sector to do a report, a proper report. The ministry said they did a report with the Food and Agriculture Organization. Well, we saw all week how that report, in terms of a rapid assessment report, and for those who do project management would understand that a rapid assessment is really an audit of expedition just to know what is happening. And the depth of that report did not look at the impact of island gas sector. So in essence, the government, even though giving out monies to fishing folks, are not sincere in helping fishing folks. So I want to make that point because we're talking about cost of living. And these are the issues in terms of helping Guyanese. And the perspective I'm bringing to the issue is that the help is really no help, because the help is being done in the context of no plan to appreciate how Guyanese are being affected so that you can holistically address, instead of cash grant, maybe cash transfers. Instead of ensuring you distribute monies to people in the agri when they had the floods, and the vice president is saying over 3,800 people collected money that should not have. There is a proper assessment of those who are totally in need and are allowed to benefit, instead of months and a year on, and people are complaining that they have not received not a single dime to replant their produce. That is in the absence of the plan. So even though cost of living is on the rise, and the government and others are saying, but it's worldwide, Two things are happening in Guyana. The mismanagement and mishandling of the current situation amplifies cost of living because the monies are not given where it should be given. It's not distributed the way it should be distributed in an equitable way. So it's an amplification based on the government's own handling management of these matters, very critical, that is affecting them from even getting people some basic relief. Thinking that they're getting basic relief, you're getting cash slush funds that people are throwing money into so that friends and families are benefiting. And the second thing about the way that the issue is being dealt with is that there is no plan, there is no national development strategy, there is no plan on any particular sector. Even as I mentioned just now, the fishing folks have asked for a comprehensive plan on why there has been a depletion in fishery stats. Let us not forget, Guyana is the world's largest producer of sea bass. So Guyana is with distinction of production of marine food, of seafood. And this is the address that we're hearing from the president, 150,000. So for my fishing folks and friends and those brothers and sisters, as far as the quarantine, all the way down to Lillian, Dal, Perico, all the way in Region 2, Pomeroon, Suriname, and even Region 1. Demand your pound. Demand more than your pound. And as the article in Kaituro News a couple of months had said, that fishermen in catching fish, fishermen catching hell in terms of their ability to go out there and earn and be able to contribute meaningfully to the development of this country based on an economic area of development, which adds to agriculture in its fisheries. So those are three areas that I've shown the government's approach or attempt to deal with the issue of cost of living. And how that is done in itself does not address the issue of cost of living to the extent where it makes Guyanese more desperate and hopeless on some of these initiatives. But what do we do about that? What do you as Guyanese do about that? Well, like I explained to the gentleman first, information is power. So take the information, take the knowledge, understand what do you have to do in terms of community. And this is where community leadership comes in critical to ensuring people are given proper guidance and the level of support. No group of politicians, I am a politician, not active, but I am saying in the first person, if I was a politician sitting in office, and I'm speaking from experience, there is no dollar, there is no action, there is nothing that is going to be done on behalf of the people who elected me to represent them that not only I am aware of, but on their behalf, I am involved in. It is absolutely necessary, not because of arrogance of an individual called Sharma Solomon, but absoluteness by our Constitution that provides for that. And that is what we follow in terms of ensuring that we have good governance, and we'll come to that just now. Then it is absolutely necessary that it starts at that point. So those councils of the municipalities and the RDCs are part of shaping the policies that goes into ensuring which, when, how roads are done, to ensuring how finances are distributed, to ensuring how lands are being utilized, to ensuring that the government is going to give in an equitable way to every single citizen within the space that you are administering as a regional or municipal rep, to ensure that they do right by every single citizen. So you ask yourself how? Well, you have to be creative to ensure that you create those pressure points. The pressure points of ensuring that any state listens to its citizens and its residents more through their representation, their representatives. So, very important, I want to make sure we understand that cost of living requires for us the sort of representation from those who have been elected to be watchful of the process and to be more involved in the process. How do they get involved? I have my own methods of getting involved in terms of ensuring it is constitutional. Article 13 provides for that. And if persons are breaching the Constitution, then they should be challenged, whether it's parliamentary, extra parliamentary, or even judiciary, but they should be challenged. So that is my second position on that. That those who are to lead must be able to be formally and properly involved in the process or processes that are occurring within the boundaries of their communities. And then if those things are not reflective in ensuring people are given equitable treatment and equitable resources, the river folks are given the resources to live as equitable in terms of digital divide. People up in the rivers should also be able to access the internet if there's a blind spot. Then government must provide for that. That sort of equity. You have to ensure that you're involved to make that so as a representative. And if you're finding and you found that it is not being done, then you have to challenge it. You have to. And I just give three means by which: parliamentary, extra parliamentary, or through the judicial process. But I always believe that all options must be on the table. And this is the third suggestion, that all options must be on the table. And you can work 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, but no one option is to be worked while you're not working the others. It is important, especially in the environment in which we exist. So I give my perspective on the issue of cost of living. I explain to you what I believe are some of the solutions in terms of more involvement and direct involvement based on constitutional requirement for our local leaders, and even how to challenge what they find issues to object to. As experience would have taught me, and it is only out of some amount of experience and wisdom that I believe I'm sharing this particular insight. But people might say the government is stubborn to do what it wants to do nevertheless. And this brings me to the second point of good governance. And I will not stop speaking on good governance. And we saw that the engagements between the president and the leader of the opposition, and I spoke on this several times. I said experience taught us that when we engage the government of the People's Progressive Party, you must, not may, but must, have a pressure point. This is not a government that invited the opposition leader because they are intimidated to the extent that they feel that if they don't have the presence of the opposition leader, that they can't run the affairs of the state. They believe with or without any additional voice, they're going to do what they want to do. We found that out in Region 10. We found that even the most sane conversations, the most logical reasoning to bring any sort of bearing on the change in attitude by the PVP was resented. It was literally said that we will not listen to it until a point of pressure was created. Until a point of pressure was created. Until a point of pressure to ensure that when you have the PPP to negotiate, you have them in a position that they know that they have to negotiate in good faith and according to the Constitution, to have meaningful consultation. And as Article 13 again said, that they must be able to have the involvement of people if they're going to make decisions that impacts their lives. So what we saw over the past 48 hours? What have we seen? We have seen the government since last week at the engagements with the opposition leader and president, frustrating even that meeting to the agenda. And at the end of that meeting, because again, there's no pressure point. There's no pressure point. So we can tell you we'll meet you in 7 days. And without even saying anything, we can just don't meet with you in 7 days, then write to you and say we want to meet with you. And in essence, disrespect you. Well, this is what the leader of the opposition said, not my words, but I think it's quite evident to all of Guyana that the leader of the opposition was indeed disrespected by the president in his treatment to what we were so anticipating as the bastion, as the last hope for some level of good governance. And I'll take you back where those first two broke down, where this last one should have survived. So now you have Gail Teixeira saying that even if they meet, the government will appoint without even justifying who they're appointing. Here comes today's appointment of the Integrity Commission and the Police Service Commission. This is this is a well orchestrated arrangement that, because there was no pressure point, the government looks good. That CARICOM nationals, CARICOM leaders, the world, for the past 2 weeks, for different events, is with its eyes on Guyana. And Guyana is a normal democratic society. But remember, we speak democracy to say it doesn't only include free and fair elections, but democracy also represents good governance. So you have to show that. You have to show as part of good governance that bastion, that last hope for meaningful engagement at the highest level of political discourse occurs. So I'm going to welcome the opposition leader. The world is going to see me do it. But I'm going to say to the world after they leave, we don't have to justify our actions. And in saying that, I will do that today, in that we don't have to justify our actions. So you broke the first bastion down, which is those committees. Those committees that are put together through meaningful consultation that allow for, whether it's the Public Service Committee, the Teaching Service Committee, the Police Service Committee, all these service committees that are responsible for hiring, firing, and disciplinary matters within these sectors is unilaterally going to be put together by the government, as the government did with the Natural Resource Fund. So there is no oversight. There is no opposition involvement. So that is the perspective on that in terms of democracy and the issue of good governance, and where we see as a state the practice of good governance, whether it's through the subcommittees of parliament, whether it's the establishment of service committees that are constitutional, whether it's the behavior of the speaker and parliamentary agenda of itself, whether it's the president's position as it relates to the engagement with the opposition leader, good governance of Article 13, and Hugh Mahadio and Brother Witter asking for increase in minimum wage, all of those elements, all of those that are so firmly rooted in our Constitution are being overlooked. Well, the bright side is we're seeing some challenges. We're seeing that there's a challenge to the appointment of the acting commissioner of police. We see there is a challenge to the Natural Resource Fund. Now that was done. So we're seeing some challenge in the court. But I always say all cards should and must be on the table. As a society, we must understand in articulating these matters that Guyanese must appreciate that it cannot be left up to your politicians alone, but you have to find interest in understanding the solutions. So I come to solutions now. So just like with the conversation on cost of living and ensuring that the government doesn't come to communities as they are and again in local parlance, paku people and tell people but 800 jobs without saying what they are and paying them 40,000 without understanding the level of cost of living. We showed how that could be confronted with more involvement from our leadership in ensuring that nothing is done in this community or any community that is administered over by a constitutional representative, that no government comes in and give anything unknowing without their involvement of in representation of the people. Nothing is done. Same way we see with flag raising, that the mayor was not allowed to speak. That should not have required even an excite agitation for that. That should have been done prior, or nothing should have been held, period. That is the sort of involvement you have to get. And if you see challenges, as I mentioned before, then they're to be taken in 3 strides: parliamentary, extra-parliamentary, or through the judiciary. So you have to be prepared to do that. And now you come to the issue of good governance. What is the solution? How do we deal with the fact that the state is saying that they're going to proceed, notwithstanding the uncertainty of even the government and the status of the government? As we saw earlier today, all the petitions are now going to be looked at. And in fact, the most critical one is going to appear shortly. So if the petition challenging the legitimacy of the government is even being questioned, and a government behaving so arrogant to behave that they can exclude the contested party or parties that through a court process could show that they have not won the government and behaving like that. This behavior goes further than that. Even as you look at those electoral reforms and the recommendations that are being made, it is in the absence of good governance again to welcome proper dialogue, proper engagement, even for those who participated, like the Electoral Reform Committee, said that it's a sham, it's shallow. The GCOM commissioners last week said that it's a farce. They said that. They said it was absolutely worthless meeting the Attorney General. Good governance. What is the solution? My solution to those who are engaging with the state, as I always say, all options on the table, and it must be meant. That's the first solution. You cannot take your options off of the table. I am sensing that it may be difficult to get people to a point where they're prepared to struggle, because as I said last week, part of struggling requires sacrifices. And I think you can get to that point of getting people to want to make sacrifices if you're able to clearly articulate to them what these issues mean to them. What does it mean when you living in Amelia's ward and your house is being bulldozed, and then they ask you to sign a document? What does it mean? It means in that document, you're going to lose your home, you're going to lose compensation, and you're now going to pay at market rate that you can't afford. And if you can't, you're going to be penalized. That's what it means. We have to understand how to articulate things to people so that when they get it in their consciousness, they can move to that action that I speak about, which is to say that when you have leadership, then calling on you, or even yourself recognizing that you should not be in this situation because somebody appointed, whether it's commissions, whether it's so public servants. It may not be articulated to you clear now, but you're going to have a public service commission. And that is going to be a commission that whether you are politically inclined to vote for another political party, or you believe that whether you voted for them or not, you're entitled as you should be constitutionally represented by the parliament, whether through opposition or government, but one side is completely excluded, and then that commission is going to make decisions on your behalf, not until he who feels it knows it, and you understand the importance of good governance, of ensuring that that and those commissions had right and proper representation, of proper consultations, and the involvement of people, as according to Article 30, in decisions that impacted their lives. So that's the first thing. You have to get all options on the table. But to get to all options on the table, you have to get people to be clearly articulated on the issues so that you can put that extra parliamentary option on the table. I think people are beaten, people are weary, people are tired, a lot of people are in a state of hopelessness, so people don't feel the need many times to struggle. It is through clear articulation that you get them to that point of struggle. It is through clear articulation that you get them to ideologically adapt to a situation that they're prepared to make sacrifices while struggling. And I think that is the solution of those who are holding certain positions. Again, you can't want to extract from the government good governance and not clearly explaining to people how these issues are going to affect them. And we're going to touch on one more issue. And I want to take the time to, I want to touch on the shows, the weekend that we had that was used to celebrate our independence, or our 56th independence. But before we get to the show, I want to say that on the same issue of good governance, one of the other solutions outside of having all options on the table is a united front to challenge what we see. I am going to be quite honest. I am still looking to see where it all comes together. And if any credit is to be given to what we saw from the People's Progressive Party twice. Like I said, my research crossed a few of these particular issues, is how they were able to mobilize people in and out of the diaspora in Guyana and in the diaspora in the early 90s, around 1990 to 1992, WPA, PN, PPP, PAC, you name the groups, they were all not only in Guyana, but they were all across the world, painting the PNC in such a light that forced George Bush Sr., when he declared the decade of democracy, that even at the Senate, they stopped funding That's how powerful it was, the lobbying, to get electoral reforms. It happened, however, through unity and collective approach. That is something I'm yet to see. 2020, the identical thing happened. We saw a coming together of all the forces to challenge for a change in our constitution to adopt a recall legislation, which in itself was challenged. So that, and it is certainly going to come up in the petition for some level of challenge. So that is where you see the level of organization missing from our ability to, in and out of Guyana, be able to organize people around the issue of the People's Progressive Party in the government of Guyana, absence of good governance. So all options on the table, more unity, clear articulation to get people to want to struggle and make sacrifices, and ensuring that we're able to take our struggles beyond the borders of Guyana as a collective. Those are things that will help us to deal with the issue of good governance. So I suggested a few. I always said I'll proffer a few solutions. I know some may seem tasked and difficult, but I can assure you they are not. They are not because I speak from a position of experience. I speak from a position when we had our own struggles with the People's Progressive Party and entering an agreement and forced negotiation to an agreement to ensure we got to an agreement, to ensuring that we not only consolidated our forces in Guyana and other regions and across Guyana, but that we took our struggles and internationalized that struggle to the world. In meeting with Congress people, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, at that time Congressman, now Senator Hakeem Jeffries, to meet with members at the State Department. We met with people at the OAS. So those sort of coordination worked for us. And I'm saying now, we need to see a little more activeness of that with regards to good governance, which demonstrates the absence of a true democratic society. So free and fair elections again, which is being challenged even now in the government, in the court, in the CCJ, free and fair election is being challenged. So even the question mark on that for democracy exists. And the absolute absence of good governance that contributes also to a democratic society is there. So then you can clearly say, not by the dislike for a political party, not for the dislike of the People's Progressive Party, not for open conversation to sound radical, but by the definition of the principles of the Constitution, by the definition of the principles of what makes a democratic society, we are not a democracy. Period. What do we do in an undemocratic state? My time is running out. I give solutions on two matters. And at my next engagement, I'll give you some solutions on how to deal with an undemocratic society and how to ensure that it responds to your needs as Guyanese and to ensure that we get the sort of representation that we deserve. So I wanted to make that point. But before we go, I know over the weekend, leading up to the weekend, Thursday, we celebrated a milestone for Guyana. I said how I felt about that in terms of it was good to know we had those who led us to a path of self-determination. We should all feel proud of that. We should, as Guyanese, hold dear those symbols and those meanings that at one point provided for us the opportunity for us to have the synergies that we have come together to work to build one day. And unfortunately, the early 60s was so turbulent that many of that turbulence of ideology of what the Cold War represented, race of what the different races and ethnicity in Guyana represented, and politics of what the political movement at the time was. At that 60 to 64 was so turbulent that an opportunity that could have taken us into an independent nation as a collective was lost on maybe those three principles. That today you see quite evident those principles playing out, whether it's the issue of our politics, whether it's the issue of ideology and the state of the working man and where the working class, and whether it's the state of race and ethnicity and where Guyana is. So, what did we do on Thursday in recognition of all of that? So, that was part of where I find some amount of solace of we're an independent nation, but disappointment in how we continue to move as an independent nation and where we are. We choose to celebrate our independence with carnival. I am open to ideas. I tell people this. I am somebody, we know but party life. We know but partying. We understand, I got some gray, but we still understand what the young people are into. I'm still a bit youthful. I always make this joke that I can stretch my hands to the future because I'm now removing myself from that generation. And I could also extend my hand to our grown folks because I'm soon heading up that direction. So I'm positioned ideally at my age to still appreciate that young people celebrate different from our expectations. But there must be limitations. And if you give unrestricted, as in the case of, we can take COVID, we're not yet out of a pandemic. So you understand why all those protocols and all those gazettes were drawn up to just throw that whole thing aside. You know how much money, how much persons lost their lives, and then we just shut that down over the past 2 weeks. You check the dashboard for COVID, it's on the TCL, the new political party. It's on their dashboard. You see the increase of COVID tremendously over the past 3 weeks. And obviously, it's owing to that certain level of engagement. So that's the first level of breakdown. We saw Paul Slow retired assistant commissioner and immediate past chairman of the Police Service Commission give a very scathing report on the breakdown of law and order on the night of some of these shows. So again, as we look at an independent nation and where we can find the means to work to bring it together, what we have as a promotion would be events that does not add but takes away at every level of ensuring that we could uphold and upkeep, whether it's rule of law or whether it's advisories to ensure that we are a safe and healthy society. That is what we're using. Getting into the show, I would not, I wasn't there. I saw all the gunshots and all the craziness and riots and all the excitement. And I can say this to you. I prayed, and I think fortunately we can say of all the madness, no one lost their life. No one lost their life. And I think it's an opportunity to see where penalties can now be put in place. Not like Christmas when there was a breach of protocol, not like Independence when there was a breach of protocol, but true penalties could be put in place to hold people accountable for the many lives that they are taking responsibility over for a few more days. So thanks for having me on this evening. I know we had a good, well, I would think so, opportunity to look at the issue of cost of living from a perspective of how the government is trying to address it. And we see the level of confusion and disjointed, disorganized, no planning to address cost of living. We've highlighted a few issues from Linden to the fishing folks to the cash grant and how those things without a plan doesn't relieve or address the issue of cost. We've shown how to deal with those things at a level of local leaders and where they have to keep their options on the table to ensure that works done in these areas are in the name of people that they must represent. We look at good governance and how these service commission and police and constitutional commissions are being put in place and where a point of pressure. I know people might say, you're listening to Sharma. Yes, do listen, because it is not going to be me, but it's going to be an empowered people who will understand that all options are going to be on the table. And they're going to get to that point through clear articulation of why they should keep all options on the table. So we looked at that in relation to how to address the issue of good governance. We also highlighted the fact in the absence of the things to inform a democratic state, Guyana is not a democratic society. Not. This is quite clearly. This is not me trying to say that or not. This is just what it is. And then we looked at a few issues outside of how the independence celebration, which was a good opportunity to build on as a nation. I always say to people the civil rights movement is still active because there is never ending issues of especially the Afro Americans to strive for equality against the issue of social justice reforms, or to have social justice reforms, to have the sort of legislation that takes care of voting rights and all of those things. They are still quest. So you see that vigor and passion from people to fight for different things. In Guyana, I think our thing was we struggled for independence. In between getting independence, we had that level of ideological confusion of the Cold War, and people took sides that still affect us to this day. The ethnicity and politics collided. Those two also brought over themselves into an era of now that made us lose an opportunity to struggle beyond independence. So when we got independence, everybody went back into their own shell and think that was the end of the struggles of a collective Guyana. And we don't see anything else more to struggle for. So on the next program, I'll discuss a few more things that we can look forward to struggle for. And that will help to bring us to a point where we understand where then do we make sacrifices having struggled ideologically that we want to see through. So thank you for having me on this evening. I look forward to be with you again and expand on the issue that I said earlier we want to talk about in terms of the elements of a democratic state. So have a blessed, pleasant evening. May Almighty God richly bless each and every one.